James Cooper starts every morning the same way, checking his Montana ranch as the sun rises, but today is different. At the edge of his property, he finds 3 baby mustangs barely clinging to life. Their bodies are weak, but their coats shine with a strange, silvery glow he's never seen before. For 40 years, he's helped every animal that's crossed his path, but something about these horses stops him in his tracks. They have markings that seem impossible. Markings that remind him of stories his grandfather used to tell about a legendary herd that vanished decades ago. As he lifts the first foal into his arms, he notices a small symbol branded beneath its mane. Could these 3 dying horses really be the missing link to America's most mysterious wild mustangs? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James's hands trembled as he dialed Sarah Martinez's number, his eyes never leaving the 3 weak foals huddled in his barn. The local vet had been his go-to for 20 years, but he'd never called her at dawn before. His grandfather's old veterinary manual lay open on a hay bale, its leather binding cracked with age. Yellowed pages marked with generations of careful notes. "Sarah, I need you, now." 20 minutes later, Sarah's truck kicked up dust on the long drive to the barn. She'd clearly dressed in a hurry, her dark hair hastily pulled back, medical kit already in hand as she jumped down from the cab. "What have we got, James?" 3 Mustang foals. Found them at the property line. He swallowed hard. "They're not good." Sarah's professional demeanor took over as she entered the barn. The morning light filtered through the slats, illuminating the scene. The foals lay on fresh hay, their breathing shallow but steady. Despite their condition, their coats caught the light strangely, almost seeming to shimmer. "My God," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside the smallest one. "I've never seen markings like these." James watched as she worked, her experienced hands checking vitals, administering fluids. He'd seen her treat hundreds of horses over the years, but something about her expression was different today. "Severe dehydration," she muttered. "Possible malnourishment, but—" She paused, running her hand along one foal's flank. "James, these patterns, they're not natural." He nodded, reaching for his grandfather's manual. "Look at this!" He opened to a page marked with a faded red ribbon, showing her a hand-drawn illustration. "My grandfather documented something similar decades ago." Sarah's eyes widened as she compared the drawing to the foals before them, the distinctive swirling patterns along their flanks, the unusual silvery sheen to their coats. It was all there in the old manual's pages. "Your grandfather was the local vet before my time," she said slowly. "He never mentioned anything about horses like these." James shook his head, turning more pages. "He wrote about them, though. Look." His finger traced lines of faded handwriting. "Notes about a special bloodline, something about genetic markers and selective breeding. Parts of it are in code. He was always paranoid about his research." A soft nicker from one of the foals drew their attention. The largest one, a colt with unusually long legs, was trying to stand. Sarah quickly moved to support him, her hands gentle but firm. "Easy there, little one. You're not ready yet." She looked at James. "We need to get them stabilized. I've got some specialty formula in my truck designed for critical cases, but James—" She hesitated. "If these are what I think they might be, this could get complicated." "What do you mean?" "These markings, these characteristics, they remind me of something I studied in vet school. There were rumors about a private breeding program somewhere in Montana. Highly classified, incredibly expensive. The goal was to recreate something called the Silvermane bloodline." James felt a chill despite the morning warmth. His grandfather had mentioned that name, always in whispers, always with a mix of awe and fear. "The formula," he said suddenly, "the one you're getting, will it be enough?" Sarah was already heading to her truck. "It has to be, but we'll need more supplies, a lot more. And James," she turned back, "don't call anyone else, not yet. If these really are Silvermane descendants, she left the warning unspoken. As she walked out, James looked again at his grandfather's manual. Between the lines of careful notes and detailed drawings, he could sense decades of secrets waiting to be uncovered. The smallest foal nudged his hand weakly, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. Whatever mystery surrounded these horses, whatever his grandfather had known, it all came down to this moment. 3 fragile lives, an old manual full of secrets, and a decision that would change everything. Night fell quickly over the Montana ranch, bringing with it a bone-deep chill that seemed to seep through the barn walls. James sat on an old wooden stool, his grandfather's manual open on his lap, watching the foals by lantern light. The smallest one worried him most. Its breathing had grown more labored over the past hour. Sarah had left detailed instructions and promised to return at dawn, but the night stretched ahead like an endless road. The specialty formula seemed to be helping, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "Come on, little one," he whispered, reaching out to stroke the smallest foal's neck. "You've got to fight." A sound from the storage loft made him look up. His own horses were restless tonight, moving anxiously in their stalls. Something about these foundlings had them on edge. James stood, his joints protesting after hours of sitting watch. He needed more blankets. The temperature was still dropping. The old storage chest in the loft might have something useful. Climbing the ladder, he pulled his flashlight from his pocket. The beam caught dust motes dancing in the air as he made his way to the massive oak chest. It had been his grandfather's, like so many things here. The lid creaked as he lifted it, revealing layers of history stored away and forgotten. Then he saw it, an old horse blanket carefully folded beneath some tack. As he pulled it out, something about the pattern made him pause. In the flashlight's beam, he could see intricate designs woven into the fabric, swirling patterns that matched the markings on the folds below. What the hell? His hand shook slightly as he unfolded it completely. The blanket was beautifully made, the craftsmanship unlike anything he'd seen before, and there, in one corner, was a small symbol, identical to the brand he'd noticed on the folds. A memory surfaced. His grandfather, years ago, carefully putting this blanket away. Some things need to stay hidden, James. Some secrets are safer buried. The smallest foal's labored breathing drew his attention back to the present. He quickly descended the ladder, precious blanket in hand. As he draped it over the struggling foal, something extraordinary happened. The little one's breathing seemed to ease, ever so slightly. James reached for his phone, quickly texting Sarah, "Found something, you need to see this." Her reply came moments later. "On my way. Keep them alive." He settled back on his stool, this time with both the manual and the blanket to study. Patterns seemed to shift in the lantern light, revealing different designs depending on how you looked at it. His grandfather's manual had similar patterns sketched in the margins, along with cryptic notes he'd never been able to decipher. The night wore on. James dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every small sound. The foals slept too, their breathing gradually becoming stronger. The blanket seemed to comfort them in a way he couldn't explain. Around 3 in the morning, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Someone had been asking questions in town about unusual horse sightings. His stomach tightened. How had word spread so quickly? He looked at the foals, at the ancient blanket covering them, at the manual filled with secrets. Whatever was happening, he knew one thing for certain. His quiet life on the ranch was about to change dramatically. Dawn was still hours away, but James Cooper had never felt more awake. In the shadows of his grandfather's barn, surrounded by mysteries he couldn't yet understand, he made a promise to those 3 fragile lives in his care. Whatever it took, whatever secrets he had to uncover, he would protect them. The smallest foal shifted in its sleep, and in the lantern light, its coat shimmered with that impossible silvery glow. Above in the loft, his horses had finally settled, as if they too had accepted these strange new additions to their stable. James touched the corner of the blanket, tracing the symbol with his finger. Sometimes, he reflected, the biggest mysteries come wrapped in the smallest packages, and sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, no matter how carefully you try to hide it. Sarah arrived just as the sun was breaking over the mountains, carrying 2 cardboard boxes that looked decades old. Her eyes widened at the sight of the antique blanket. "Your timing is perfect," James said, leading her to his grandfather's office. "I've been going through his things all night. Found this hidden behind a false panel." He pulled out a leather folder stuffed with yellowed newspaper clippings. The earliest was dated 1962, its headline bold despite the fading, mysterious. "Mustang herd captures Montana's imagination." Sarah set down her boxes and picked up the article. "The Silvermane herd," she breathed, "so it wasn't just a legend." James spread more clippings across the desk. Each told a piece of the story. Sightings of unusually marked horses in the mountains, theories about their origins, and finally the arrival of Theodore Blackwood. "July 1965, Sarah read aloud. "Billionaire Theodore Blackwood acquires rights to Wild Horse Reserve." She looked up. "James, these foals." "Keep reading." The next article detailed Blackwood's ambitious breeding program. The billionaire had become obsessed with the Silvermane herd's unique characteristics, their distinctive markings, unusual intelligence, and remarkable endurance. He'd spent millions creating a private facility in the mountains. "But here's where it gets strange," James said, pointing to a clipping from 1968. "Entire herd vanishes without trace." The article described how every horse in Blackwood's program had disappeared overnight. No broken fences, no signs of theft. They'd simply vanished, leaving behind empty stables and countless questions. Sarah opened one of her boxes, pulling out more recent documents. "I did some digging after I left yesterday. Blackwood's facility wasn't just a ranch." She spread out satellite photos and property records. "It was a research center. They were doing genetic work, trying to isolate whatever made the Silvermane horses unique. Did they succeed? That's just it. All the research vanished too, but look at this." She pulled out a scientific paper, portions heavily redacted. "They found something in the horse's DNA, something that shouldn't have been possible." James thought of the 3 foals in his barn, their impossible silvery coats. "My grandfather knew about this, didn't he?" "I think he did more than know about it." Sarah hesitated, then opened her second box. Inside was an old leather-bound journal. "I found this in the vet school archives. The author's name had been removed, but—" She opened it to a marked page. The handwriting matched the notes in James's grandfather's manual perfectly. James sank into his chair. He was part of it. The whole time he was part of Blackwood's program. "Not just part of it," Sarah said quietly. "According to these records, he was the lead veterinary geneticist. James, your grandfather helped create whatever made these horses special." A noise from outside made them both freeze. Through the window, they could see a black SUV moving slowly past the ranch entrance. "It's starting," Sarah said. "Words getting out." James gathered the clippings quickly, along with his grandfather's journal. "We need to move the foals. The back barn, maybe." "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "They're too weak to move. Besides," she pointed to the most recent satellite photo. "Look who owns the adjacent properties. All shell companies, all leading. Back to one holding corporation. Blackwood," James said grimly. "He's been waiting. All these years he's been watching this area, waiting for the herd to return." James looked at the scattered papers, each one revealing another layer of the mystery his grandfather had kept hidden. "We're going to need help." "Already on it." Sarah pulled out her phone, showing him a message. "Remember Mike Running Wolf from the tribal lands north of here? He wants to meet. Says his people have stories about these horses going back generations." The sound of another vehicle passing made them both tense. James carefully stored the clippings and journal in his grandfather's old safe. "How long until Blackwood himself shows up?" Sarah's expression was grim. "Not long. The question is, what does he want more? The foals, or the secrets your grandfather took to his grave?" Outside, the morning sun caught the mountains, turning them silver, the same impossible silver as the foals' coats. Whatever was coming, James knew they were now at the center of a mystery decades in the making. Dr. Emily Chen arrived with the efficiency of someone used to emergency calls. Her mobile genetics lab housed in a weathered Winnebago. She'd driven through the night from the University of Colorado after Sarah's cryptic phone call had piqued her scientific curiosity. "These better be worth the drive," she said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses as she stepped into the barn. Then she saw the foals. Oh my God! The smallest one had rallied overnight, all three now standing shakily. In the morning light, their coats rippled with that otherworldly sheen. Emily approached slowly, her trained eye catching details others might miss. "The phenotype expression is impossible." She reached for her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "These markings shouldn't exist in any known equine genome." James and Sarah exchanged glances. "We have something you need to see," Sarah said, leading her to the office. As Emily reviewed the documents, her expression shifted from skepticism to wonder. Blackwood's research. I'd heard rumors, but everyone thought it was just another rich man's fantasy. She looked up sharply. "You said your grandfather was involved." "Lead geneticist," James confirmed, "but he took most of his secrets to the grave." Emily pulled equipment from her cases. Centrifuges, testing kits, analytical devices that looked more suited to a space program than a barn. "We'll start with basic DNA sequencing. If these foals are what I think they are..." Her voice trailed off as her first test results appeared. The color drained from her face. "This can't be right." She ran the test again, and again. "These markers, they're not just unique. They're showing signs of deliberate engineering, but at a level that shouldn't have been possible in the 1960s. Sarah leaned in to look at the results. "What does that mean?" "It means," Emily said slowly, "that your grandfather wasn't just breeding horses. He was creating something entirely new, something that, by all scientific understanding, shouldn't exist." A series of sharp beeps from her equipment drew their attention. Emily's eyes widened as she read the new data. The genetic stability is remarkable. Perfect protein folding, enhanced mitochondrial function. These foals aren't just surviving by chance. They were designed to find their way here. "To find their way home," James murmured, remembering his grandfather's words about the herd's disappearance. "Some things return when they're ready." Emily was already preparing more tests. "We need to document everything. The scientific implications." "Alone," she stopped at Sarah's warning look. "Right, discretion." But it was too late. Through the window, they could see 3 more black SUVs crawling past the ranch entrance. Word was spreading faster than they'd feared. "How long can you stay?" James asked Emily. She was already setting up her next batch of tests. "As long as needed." "But James," she held up a data readout, "whatever your grandfather created, whatever these foals represent, it's bigger than any of us imagined. The genetic sequences I'm seeing, they could revolutionize our understanding of DNA itself." Sarah's phone buzzed. Another message from Mike Running Wolf. "He says he's coming tonight. His grandmother remembers something about the original." Heard. James watched the foals, now huddled together beneath the antique blanket. Their silvery coats seemed to pulse with an inner light, a living testament to his grandfather's hidden genius. Emily's voice was quiet, but intense. We need to protect them, not just for their own sake, but for what they represent. This kind of genetic advancement, in the wrong hands. She didn't need to finish. They all knew what kind of power was contained in those three fragile bodies. The sound of another vehicle on the road only emphasized the growing urgency of their situation. The smallest foal looked up at them with eyes that seemed too knowing, too aware. In that moment, James understood why his grandfather had gone to such lengths to keep these secrets hidden. Some mysteries weren't meant to be unraveled, they were meant to be protected. The security cameras caught them just before sunset. Three men in expensive suits approaching the main gate with the confidence of people used to getting their way. James watched the feed from his grandfather's office, Emily and Sarah flanking him on either side. "Right on schedule," Sarah muttered, checking her phone. More messages were pouring in, locals reporting suspicious vehicles, questions from reporters, even a few threats. The barn's exterior cameras showed two news vans parked at the property line. "Dr. Cooper?" A crisp voice crackled through the intercom. "This is William Hayes, representing Blackwood Enterprises. We'd like a moment of your time." James glanced at the feed showing the foals, peaceful under Emily's careful monitoring. "Your grandfather's security system is still running," Sarah whispered. "Motion sensors, night vision, everything still works." The footage showed Hayes pulling out his phone, likely noting their hesitation. "Dr. Cooper, I'm authorized to make an extremely generous offer, one that could secure your ranch's future for generations." Emily's laptop pinged, another test result. She'd been running analyses continuously since her arrival. "James," she said quietly, "these genetic markers, they're evolving. The foals are actually getting stronger." A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Through the camera, they could see Hayes's companions had circled around to the back entrance. Professional looking, but with the subtle bulges of concealed weapons. "Time to make a decision," Sarah said. James pressed the intercom. "Mr. Hayes, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I'm not interested in any offers right now. I don't think you understand the situation." Hayes's voice hardened. "These animals are Blackwood property. The genetic lineage is legally protected." "Funny," James replied. "I don't see any brands or registration papers claiming ownership. We have documentation from 1965, when my grandfather was involved." James watched Hayes's expression shift on the monitor. "Yeah, we know about that. Just like we know about the mysterious disappearance of the entire herd." A new vehicle appeared on the cameras. Local Sheriff Tom Bradley, responding to their earlier call. Hayes noticed, too, his posture stiffening. "This isn't over, Dr. Cooper. Mr. Blackwood himself will be very interested to hear about this development." They watched on the monitors as Hayes and his men retreated to their vehicles, passing the sheriff on their way out. The news vans surged forward, reporters hoping for a statement. "We've got bigger problems," Emily said, pointing to her laptop. "These readings, someone's been scanning the barn. Electronic surveillance trying to peek inside." Sarah was already moving. "I'll do a sweep, check for bugs." "Hold on." James pointed to a new alert on the security feed. The motion sensors had picked up movement in the trees behind the barn. Someone taking photos with a long-range lens. Emily quickly covered her equipment. "They're not just after the foals now. They want the research too." The smallest foal nickered softly, drawing their attention. In the growing darkness, its coat seemed to glow more intensely than ever. The security cameras caught the ethereal light, creating a haunting image on the monitors. "We need to move." "Them," James decided. The back barn has better security, fewer windows. They're still weak, Sarah protested. They're stronger than you think. Emily showed them her latest readings. Whatever your grandfather engineered into their DNA, it's not just surviving, it's thriving. These foals were meant to adapt and survive. As if to prove her point, all three foals stood steadily, their eyes reflecting the security lights with an almost supernatural gleam. Outside, they could hear Sheriff Bradley dispersing the media crowd, but they all knew it was temporary relief at best. Mike Running Wolf will be here soon, Sarah reminded them. Maybe his grandmother's stories can help us understand what we're really dealing with. James studied the security footage, watching Hayes's vehicles disappear down the road. In less than 24 hours, his quiet ranch had become the center of a storm decades in the making, and somehow he knew this was only the beginning. The legal document arrived by courier at dawn, 20 pages of precisely worded text, bound in expensive leather. The courier himself looked like he'd stepped out of a law firm's recruiting brochure, complete with a silver Mont Blanc pen for signing. $15 million, Sarah read, her voice hollow, plus full ownership rights to the surrounding properties. They sat in James's kitchen, the morning light casting long shadows across the contract. Emily paced behind them, still, processing the genetic data from her overnight tests. Outside, the media presence had doubled. Satellite trucks now joined the news vans. It's not just money, Emily said, studying her latest results. Look at page 12. They're offering full access to Blackwood's research facilities, the kind of equipment most scientists only dream about. James turned to the specified page. The list of resources was staggering. Cutting-edge laboratories, unlimited funding, a dedicated research team. Everything needed to unlock the secrets in the foal's DNA. Keep reading, Sarah urged. The fine print. The terms were clear. Full transfer of ownership. The foals, any future offspring, all research data, and, most crucially, all of James's grandfather's records and notes. Everything would become Blackwood's intellectual property. They know, Emily said quietly. They must have figured out that your grandfather didn't just work for the program. He was the one who made it all possible. A noise from the barn's security feed drew their attention. The foals were more active now, moving with increasing strength. Their coats caught the morning light, sending shimmer patterns dancing across the barn walls. There's something else. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing them a news alert. Blackwood's company just announced a major breakthrough in genetic medicine. They're claiming their research could revolutionize how we treat inherited diseases. Timing's not a coincidence, James muttered. The courier cleared his throat politely. Mr. Blackwood asked me to mention that this offer expires at sunset. Emily's laptop pinged again. Her eyes widened as she read the new data. James, these genetic sequences we're seeing, they're not just unique. They're showing signs of targeted enhancement at a cellular level. Your grandfather wasn't just breeding special horses. He was developing something that could change our understanding of genetic engineering itself. Sarah studied the contract again. No wonder they're offering so much. This goes way beyond rare horses. Dr. Cooper? The courier's voice was carefully neutral. Mr. Blackwood also asked me to remind you about the regulatory implications. Unauthorized genetic research carries significant legal risks. The threat was clear, if elegantly wrapped. James walked to the window, watching the media circus growing. Outside his gate, his grandfather had spent decades protecting these secrets. Now, in less than a week, it was all unraveling. What would he do? James wondered aloud. If he were here, as if in answer, the smallest foal appeared in the security feed. It stood in a shaft of sunlight, its coat blazing with that impossible silver radiance. For a moment, it seemed to look directly into the camera, its eyes holding an intelligence that sent chills down James's spine. "Your grandfather had a chance to sell too," Sarah said softly. "Didn't he? That's what those old letters suggested. But he chose to hide everything instead." Emily set her laptop down. "James, these genetic markers, they're not just scientific achievements. They represent something more fundamental if Blackwood gets control." The courier coughed again, gesturing to his watch. Outside, another news van pulled up to join the growing media encampment. $15 million, a chance to unlock scientific mysteries, protection from legal complications. The offer was everything a rational person could want. James picked up the contract, feeling its weight, both physical and metaphorical. His grandfather had carried secrets for decades, protecting something he believed was more valuable than money or fame. Now that burden had passed to him. The foals watched through the security feed, their silver coats glowing like beacons in the morning light. Whatever his grandfather had created, whatever mysteries lay encoded in their DNA, one thing was becoming clear. Some things weren't meant to be bought and sold. The old ranch ledger fell from a high shelf as they were moving equipment to the back barn, its worn leather cover splitting on impact. What spilled out wasn't accounting records. It was a lifetime of secrets. "These aren't financial entries," Emily said, carefully spreading the yellowed pages across a workbench. "They're research notes, encoded but not encoded," James interrupted, recognition dawning. "It's in Mandarin, my grandmother's native language." He traced the characters with a trembling finger. "My grandfather learned it for her. Said it was their secret way of communicating." Sarah and Emily watched as James translated, his voice growing more intense with each passage. "Project Silvermane exceeds all expectations. Genetic markers stable across third generation. Blackwood pushes for accelerated testing, but the horses show signs of awareness that go beyond enhanced intelligence. They're evolving in ways we never anticipated." The smallest foal pressed against its stall door, nickering softly as James continued reading. "Today, I witnessed something impossible. The lead mare, Silver Queen, solved a complex puzzle box we designed for primate testing. But it wasn't just problem-solving. She then taught the solution to her offspring. Blackwood sees weapons potential, military applications. But he's blind to the truth. We've created something sacred." Emily's equipment beeped urgently. "The foal's vital signs are spiking. It's like they're responding to the words." More pages revealed deeper mysteries. Diagrams of DNA structures. Unlike anything in known science, notes about behavioral patterns that defied explanation, and most surprisingly, correspondence with Native American elders about ancient horse legends. The tribal stories were true, James read. These bloodlines didn't come from ordinary stock. The original Silvermane herd carried genetics we'd never seen before. Nature had already created what we thought we were inventing. We weren't creators. We were rediscovering something ancient, something powerful. Sarah's phone buzzed. Mike Runningwolf was on his way. The timing felt significant. Then they found the photos, carefully preserved between the pages. James's grandfather, with a magnificent silver mare, her coat shimmering with the same otherworldly patterns as the foals. More photos showed other horses, each bearing impossible markings. The final entry was dated the night before the herd's disappearance. "Blackwood plans to weaponize the program. Military contracts are drawn, but Silver Queen showed me something tonight that changed everything. These horses aren't just genetic marvels, they're awakening something that was lost. To time, they have to be protected, not exploited. By dawn, they'll be gone. The herd knows where to go, how to hide. Nature will shield them until the time is right, and if you're reading this, James, it means they've chosen to return. The choice I made must now be yours." James looked up from the ledger, his world transformed. He didn't just work for Blackwood. He orchestrated the herd's escape and encoded everything in a language only family would understand, Sarah added. Emily studied the DNA diagrams with growing amazement. These genetic structures, they're decades ahead of current science. But look at these notes about tribal legends. He was combining cutting-edge genetics with ancient wisdom. Outside, they could hear the media crowd growing restless. The courier's deadline was approaching, but now the decision felt different. James walked to the foals, who watched him with those two intelligent eyes. The smallest one, the one that had been weakest, now stood tall and strong. Its coat rippled with silver light, just like Silver Queen in the photographs. "They didn't just find their way here by accident," he said quietly. "They chose to come. Back to the one place where someone would understand what they really are." Sarah joined him at the stall. "Your grandfather gave up everything to protect them, his reputation, his research, his legacy." "No," James corrected, looking at the ledger that had changed everything. "This is his legacy. He chose to be a guardian instead of an exploiter. Now it's my turn." The foals moved in perfect synchronization, pressing close to the stall door. In the growing darkness, their silver markings seemed to pulse with inner light. Emily's monitors showed their vital signs perfectly aligned, like a single organism. "Your grandfather's last gift," Emily whispered. "Not just the horses, but the truth about what they represent." James carefully closed the ledger, feeling the weight of decades of secrets in his hands. Outside, the sun was setting on Blackwood's deadline. But the real deadline had been set long ago, when his grandfather chose to protect something more valuable than money or fame. He had chosen to protect a miracle. The sun was inches from the horizon when Mike Running Wolf's truck pulled up to the barn. The elderly woman in the passenger seat, his grandmother Rose, carried a small bundle wrapped in faded red cloth. Her weathered face showed no surprise. "At the media circus by the gate. You've stirred up quite a storm," she said, her voice strong despite her age. She ignored the contract on the table, walking straight to the foals. "Ah, just like the stories." James watched as she unwrapped her bundle, revealing a collection of aged photographs. Not the crisp scientific documentation from his grandfather's ledger, but personal snapshots, clearly treasured. "My great-grandmother took these," Rose said, spreading them out. 1922, before your grandfather, before Blackwood. Back when the original herd still ran free. The photos, though faded, showed horses with the same impossible silver markings. They were gathered around a rock formation James recognized. It was still on his property, though hidden by decades of forest growth. "Sacred ground," Rose explained. "The old ones said these horses weren't just animals. They were guardians of something deeper, something in the land itself." Emily leaned in. Her scientific curiosity piqued. "These markings, they're identical to our genetic readings, but these photos predate any genetic engineering." "Because your grandfather didn't create something new," Rose said. "He found something old, something that was waiting to be rediscovered." The courier's expensive watch ticked loudly in the growing silence. Sunset approaching, deadline with it. Sarah brought out the family photos they'd discovered, James's grandfather with the herd. Rose nodded slowly. He understood. That's why he helped them escape. Some things aren't meant to be owned. The smallest foal approached the stall door, touching its muzzle to Rose's outstretched hand. The contact seemed to make its coat glow brighter. "The military wanted weapons," Mike added. "Blackwood wanted profits. But these horses, they've always had their own purpose." James studied the contract again, its promises of wealth and scientific advancement now feeling hollow. His phone buzzed, haze, reminding him the deadline was minutes away. Emily's equipment beeped, drawing their attention. "These readings, The foal's vital signs are synchronized with the electromagnetic field of the land itself. It's like they're connected to something we can't see. Rose smiled. Not can't see, choose not to see. Your grandfather learned to see it. That's why they've returned now to you. The sun touched the horizon. In its dying light, all three foals began to glow, their silver markings pulsing like starlight. Mr. Cooper, the courier's voice was tense. Mr. Blackwood is expecting my call. James looked at the photos spanning a century, his grandfather's scientific documentation beside Rose's family memories. Different perspectives capturing the same miracle. He picked up the contract, feeling its weight one last time. Rose watched him, her eyes ancient and knowing. They chose you, she said simply, just like they chose your grandfather. The question is, will you choose them back? Outside, the media lights created a false dawn. The courier's phone rang, Blackwood himself demanding an answer. James thought of his grandfather's encoded notes, the sacrifice he'd made to protect something greater than himself. He thought of Rose's stories, reaching back to a time before science tried to explain everything. The smallest foal nickered softly, and in that sound, James heard an echo of all the decisions that had led to this moment. His grandfather choosing integrity over profit, the original herd choosing freedom over captivity, and now these three miraculous survivors choosing to return, trusting him to understand. He turned to the courier, decision crystallized into certainty. Sometimes the most valuable things couldn't be bought or sold. Sometimes the real treasure wasn't in what you could gain, but in what you chose to protect. The sun slipped below the horizon, taking Blackwood's deadline with it. In the growing darkness, three pairs of knowing eyes watched James, their silver coats glowing like beacons of truth in a world too often blinded by greed. His choice, in the end, wasn't about money or science or legacy. It was about being worthy of the trust these remarkable creatures had placed in him. The medicine pouch Rose pulled from her jacket looked ancient, its leather darkened by generations of handling. Your grandfather wasn't the first to protect them, she said, untying its worn strings. Our people have been guardians longer than anyone remembers. Inside was a mixture of herbs that filled the barn with an unfamiliar sweet scent. The foals responded immediately, their ears pricking forward with interest. Mountain sage, Rose explained, gathered from the high places where the original herd roamed. But there's something else you need to see. She reached deeper into the pouch, withdrawing a small carved wooden horse. Its surface was etched with markings identical to those on the foals. This was carved by my great-great-grandmother, she said, placing it in James's palm. She was there when the first silver horses appeared in our valleys. They came during a time of great hardship, when the people needed hope. Emily's scientific curiosity warred with what she was witnessing. The foals had approached as close as their stall allowed, their coats shimmering in patterns that seemed to match the carving's markings. The herbs are for protection, Mike explained, but they're also a test. Only the true silver horses respond to them. It's how our people always knew the real ones from pretenders. Sarah's phone buzzed. More messages about suspicious vehicles in the area. Blackwood wasn't taking rejection well. You're not alone in this, Rose said, noting James's concern. Word is spreading through the old networks. People remember what these horses mean. As if confirming her words, Emily's laptop chimed with incoming emails. Scientific communities taking notice too. Researchers, conservationists, people are asking questions about genetic preservation and indigenous knowledge. The old ways and the new, Rose nodded, just like your grandfather understood. He came to us, you know, before the herd disappeared, wanted to know the stories, the traditions. He learned that some knowledge isn't meant to be owned, it's meant to be protected. The smallest foal stretched its neck toward the medicine pouch, nostrils flaring. Rose smiled, sprinkling a pinch of herbs near the stall. The foal's coat began to pulse with light, like starlight flowing beneath its skin. "Your grandfather combined modern science with ancient wisdom," Mike said. "That's why his work succeeded where Blackwood failed. He respected the mystery instead of trying to control it." More vehicles were gathering at the property line, but now there were trucks from local ranches mixed in with the media vans. Sarah checked her phone again. "Local families," she reported. "They're forming a buffer, keeping Blackwood's people back, saying these horses belong to the land, not to corporations." James held the carved horse, feeling its weight of history. "How do we protect them? Really protect them, not just for now, but for the future?" Rose's smile deepened. "By remembering that you're part of something bigger, the same something your grandfather discovered." She reached into the medicine pouch one last time, withdrawing a small leather book. "He left this with us for safekeeping, said it would be needed when the horses returned." The book was filled with his grandfather's handwriting. Not scientific notes this time, but detailed records of tribal stories, healing practices, and ancient horsekeeping wisdom. Scientific formulas were interwoven with traditional knowledge, each informing the other. "Your grandfather learned that true guardianship means bridging worlds," Rose said. "Modern and ancient, science and spirit. That's why they've returned now, because they need both." Outside, the sounds of engines and voices grew. But they weren't all hostile now. Local families, tribal members, even a few scientists who'd seen Emily's preliminary reports, people who understood that some things were worth protecting. The carved horse in James's hand seemed to grow warmer, as if responding to the living horses before him. 3 pairs of knowing eyes watched him, their silver coats glowing stronger as the herb-sweet air swirled around them. He wasn't just protecting 3 unusual foals anymore. He was protecting a legacy that stretched back generations, connecting past and present, science and mystery, in ways he was only beginning to understand. The weather-beaten map Rose spread across the workbench showed trails James had never known existed on his own land. Faded lines marked ancient horse paths through the mountains, places where the original herds had moved unseen for generations. "Your grandfather added his own markings," she said, pointing to newer annotations. "Look here, emergency routes, hidden springs, caves where horses could shelter unseen." Thunder rolled overhead as Emily burst in from the rain. "Power's out. In half the county, roads are flooding, but that's not our biggest problem." She held up her phone, showing multiple alerts. "Blackwood's people are using the storm as cover. They're moving in from 3 directions." The map seemed to hold new urgency as lightning illuminated the barn. James traced the marked trails with his finger, seeing his grandfather's foresight in every annotation. He'd known this day might come. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. She was patrolling the perimeter. Multiple vehicles just turned off their lights at the north fence. They're trying to slip in quiet. The smallest foal nickered sharply, and all 3 horses turned to face the same direction, their silver coats glowing brighter against the storm's darkness. Through the rain-streaked windows, they could see flashlight beams moving through the trees. "They're not just coming for the horses," Emily said, checking her equipment. "My data uploads were tracked. They know we've confirmed the genetic markers. They'll want everything, research, samples, all of it." Rose calmly opened her medicine pouch, the sweet herb scent mixing with the storm's electric air. "Your grandfather knew these moments would come. That's why he marked the high trail here." She pointed to a nearly invisible line on the map. "The original herd used it when they needed to disappear." Lightning flashed again, and in that instant, the foal's markings seemed to shift and flow like quicksilver. Their eyes reflected something older than genetics, something that spoke to deep memory and ancient knowledge. Mike's voice joined Sarah's on the radio. "Got tribal police setting up roadblocks, but this storm's making it hard to see who's who. And some of these vehicles have government plates." James studied the map's hidden trails, while Rose mixed herbs with practiced hands. Emily frantically backed up data while deleting files from local drives. Outside, the storm intensified as if nature itself was responding to the tension. The smallest foal suddenly reared, its silver markings blazing like captured lightning. The other two followed suit, moving in perfect synchronization. Their combined glow illuminated the barn like daylight. "Look!" Emily pointed to her readings. "They're genetic markers. They're not just stable anymore. They're strengthening, adapting. It's like the stress is triggering something encoded in their DNA." Rose nodded, unsurprised. "The old stories say the silver horses were strongest when danger came. That's how they protected the things that mattered most." Another radio crackle. "They're at the east fence now, professional team military training. They're not here to negotiate." James felt the weight of generations pressing down. His grandfather's scientific brilliance, Rose's ancestral wisdom, the mysteries encoded in silver-bright DNA, all of it converging in this storm-swept moment. The map showed one more marking, almost hidden in its creases. A small star, drawn in his grandfather's hand, marking a place where the mountain held secrets older than any human claims. "The horses know," Rose said quietly. "They've always known. The question is, do you trust them enough to follow?" Lightning transformed the barn into a silver-painted tableau. 3 glowing foals, now strong and sure despite their desperate beginning. Emily's machines tracking microscopic mysteries, Rose's medicine pouch offering ancient protection, and the map showing paths that existed long before deeds and contracts tried to carve up the land. Thunder shook the foundations as James made his choice. Sometimes survival meant knowing when to stand and fight, and sometimes it meant knowing when to follow older wisdom. He touched the star on the map just as headlights swept the barn walls. The foals moved as one, their silver light steady against the storm's chaos. Outside, voices fought with thunder, while flashlight beams searched through rain. But inside, for just a moment, time seemed to pause. 3 impossible horses, their genetics bridging past and future, waited for their guardian to understand what his grandfather had learned before him. Some treasures could only be protected by believing in mysteries larger than mankind's laws. The broken fence post told its own story. Clean cuts, professional tools, methodical destruction. James crouched in the rain, running his fingers over the severed wood as lightning illuminated the scene. 3 sets of fresh tire tracks led to this point, then scattered in different directions. "They're testing our responses," Sarah said through the radio, "seeing how we react where we're weakest." Inside the barn, Emily's voice rose with urgency. "James, get back here, now." He found them gathered around Emily's laptop, faces lit by its glow, and the foal's silver radiance. On the screen, security footage showed a familiar figure, his own cousin, Mark, letting 2 of Blackwood's men through a back gate. "Family," Rose said softly, "can be the hardest test of all." The radio crackled again. "Multiple breaches. They're coming through!" Static cut off the rest. The smallest foal screamed, a sound unlike anything they'd heard before. All 3 horses began to glow so brightly it hurt to look at them directly. Outside, engines roared over thunder. "They're using Mark's codes," Emily reported, checking the security system. "He's given them everything, gate access, alarm bypasses, the works." James felt the weight of betrayal settle like ice in his stomach. Mark had grown up on this ranch. 2 heard the same stories from their grandfather, but he'd always seen the land as an asset to be sold, not a legacy to be protected. The barn door burst open. Mark stood there, rain-soaked, flanked by Hayes and another suit. Behind them, more figures moved in the darkness. "It's over, Jimmy," Mark said, using the childhood nickname like a weapon. "Be smart about this." Blackwood's, offering enough to set up everyone in the family for life. "Everyone except the horses," James replied. Hayes stepped forward, his expensive shoes muddy. "Dr. Cooper, your grandfather's research has implications far beyond a few unusual foals. Think of the medical applications, the military potential." "That's exactly what he did think about," James cut in. "That's why he helped them escape the first time." A new alarm blared, more perimeter breaches. Sarah's voice tense, but controlled. "They're surrounding the barn. Professional team, at least 12. The foals moved in perfect synchronization, their silver markings pulsing like heartbeats. Emberley's equipment sparked and died as the horse's glow intensified. "Last chance," Mark said. "Don't be stupid like the old man." But James was watching Rose. The elder hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but her hands were busy in her medicine pouch. The herb-sweet scent grew stronger, mixing with the storm's electric air. "Our grandfather," James said carefully, "wasn't stupid. He was wise enough to see what really mattered." Mark's face hardened. "Then you leave us no choice," he gestured. To the men behind him, "Take everything, the horses, the research, all of it." But as they moved forward, the impossible happened. The foal's glow suddenly expanded, filling the barn with silver light. Where it touched Emily's equipment, screens flickered with impossible data. Where it met Rose's herbs, the air seemed to thicken and swirl. In that eternal moment, James saw what his grandfather must have seen all those years ago. Some things couldn't be stolen because they could only be given freely. The silver horses weren't just genetic marvels. They were guardians of a truth too profound for greed to touch. Mark staggered back, shielding his eyes. Hayes barked orders into a radio, but his voice was lost in a new sound. Hoofbeats, echoing from all directions, as if a phantom herd was circling the barn. Rose smiled, her ancient eyes reflecting silver light. "They remember," she said simply. "The land remembers, the horses remember, and now, finally, so do we." The storm peaked overhead, thunder merging with those impossible hoofbeats. In the chaos, James caught a glimpse of his cousin's face, not greed now, but fear. Fear of something older than money, stronger than ambition. The smallest foal reared up, its silver light becoming a beacon in the storm. And in that light, everything changed. The private journal landed on the barn floor, thrown by a figure emerging from the storm, Theodore Blackwood himself, elderly but unbowed, his expensive coat dark with rain. Behind him, Mark and Hayes exchanged uncertain glances. "Your grandfather," Blackwood said, his voice carrying despite the storm, "wrote that the day before he betrayed me, before he destroyed 30 years of work." James picked up the journal, its pages filled with his grandfather's bold handwriting, not coded this time, but raw and urgent. "Blackwood doesn't understand what we've uncovered. These aren't just enhanced animals. They're a bridge to something ancient, something that existed long before our science tried to explain it. The genetic markers we've isolated don't create their abilities. They only awaken what was always there, sleeping in the blood of certain horses since time immemorial." The smallest foal approached the stall door, its silver glow illuminating Blackwood's face. The old man's expression mixed wonder with cold calculation. "Your grandfather was brilliant," Blackwood continued, "but he became a mystic at the end. Started talking about tribal legends, about powers that existed before civilization. Forgot that we were men of science." "No," Rose said quietly. "He remembered that science isn't the only truth." Emily's surviving equipment beeped insistently. "These readings, the genetic markers aren't just patterns of DNA. They're more like keys, unlocking something that's been dormant." Blackwood smiled thinly. Exactly. Imagine the applications: controlled activation of dormant genetic potential, military enhancement, medical breakthroughs, billions in patents alone. James continued reading from the journal. Blackwood's military contracts are just the beginning. He wants to isolate the activation sequences, create synthetic versions. But he doesn't understand. These horses aren't a resource to be exploited. They're guardians of an older wisdom, returned when humanity needs to remember what it's forgotten. The storm's intensity grew, matching the foal's pulsing radiance. That phantom sound of hoofbeats returned, stronger now, as if countless invisible horses circled the barn. "Your grandfather had his chance to change the world," Blackwood said. "Instead, he chose superstition over progress. Let a fortune slip away because of tribal stories and mystical nonsense." But James was still reading. "The horses showed me the truth, not in laboratories, but in moments of pure connection. They're not meant to be changed by us. They're meant to change us, to remind us that the world is larger than our instruments can measure, deeper than our science can explain." The smallest foal nickered, and suddenly its silver glow expanded, forming patterns in the air, the same patterns from Rose's carved horse, from the ancient photographs, from the first sightings over a century ago. "My God," Emily whispered, checking her readings. "The genetic activation, it's not just in the horses, it's affecting the electromagnetic field of the entire area. It's like they're waking up the land itself." Blackwood's composure cracked slightly. "Precisely why they need to be contained, studied. This power has to be controlled." "No," James said, understanding finally reaching his core. "It was never about control. It was about remembrance." He read the journal's final entry. "I finally understand what the tribal elders meant. These horses don't belong to us. They belong to the balance, appearing when needed, awakening what's forgotten, reminding us that not everything sacred can be bought and sold. Blackwood will never understand. He sees their power as a resource to be mined, but they're not. A means to an end. They're a reminder of what we once knew, what we've forgotten in our rush to dominate rather than understand." The foals moved as one, their combined light filling the barn with impossible radiance. In it, James saw what his grandfather had seen, not just enhanced animals, but beings that carried an ancient wisdom in their blood, a power meant to heal rather than harm. Blackwood stepped forward, his facade of reason cracking. "Don't be a fool like him. This is bigger than tribal legends and mystical nonsense. This is the future." But the horse's light showed the truth in his eyes. Not progress, but possession. Not discovery, but dominance. The same hunger that had driven him decades ago, that had forced James's grandfather to choose between profit and wisdom. The journal's last words seemed to glow. "If you're reading this, it means they've returned. Not to be used, but to remind. The choice I made must now be made again. Some powers aren't meant to be controlled. They're meant to teach us how much we still have to learn." The legal brief Sarah pulled from her truck was still warm from the printer. "Filed electronically 10 minutes ago," she said, handing copies to everyone. "Emergency injunction citing the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, plus endangered species provisions. These horses aren't just animals, they're living cultural heritage." Outside, the storm still raged, but now the sound of sirens cut through the thunder. Red and blue lights reflected off rain-slick surfaces, as tribal police vehicles formed a perimeter around the barn. "You can't do this," Blackwood sputtered, reading the brief. "These horses were created in my facility." "No," Rose interrupted, her quiet voice carrying unexpected authority. "They were awakened there, but they existed long before you, Mr. Blackwood. Our stories remember them. Our carvings show them. Your own research proved what our people always knew. Emily's remaining equipment continued recording as the foal's silver light pulsed in synchronization with the distant thunder. The genetic markers, she explained, studying the readings, they're not mutations or engineering. They're activation, sequences for traits that were always there, dormant in certain bloodlines. Mike Runningwolf's voice crackled over the radio. State police are 5 minutes out. Fish and Wildlife Service too. Somebody leaked Blackwood's military contracts. They're asking questions about unauthorized genetic testing. James watched. His cousin Mark backing slowly toward the door, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd almost helped destroy. Hayes was already on his phone, speaking urgently to what sounded like lawyers. The smallest foal approached Blackwood, its silver markings flowing like quicksilver. The old man's expression shifted between awe and desperate calculation. Think about what you're throwing away, he tried one last time. The medical applications alone are already happening, Emily cut in, showing her tablet screen. But not the way you planned. Look at these readings. The activation sequences, when properly understood, don't create changes. They restore natural patterns. It's not about enhancement. It's about remembrance. Sarah was still coordinating with authorities outside, but now she turned to James with a slight smile. Your grandfather's last failsafe just kicked in. 20 years ago, he filed sealed documents with multiple agencies, set them to automatically unlock if certain keywords ever appeared in connection with the ranch. The old man thought of everything, Mike said admiringly. The legal brief laid out the full scope of protection. Indigenous rights, environmental conservation, genetic heritage preservation. Page after page of carefully crafted legal shields, prepared decades ago and updated by Sarah's deft legal work. But it was more than just law. As tribal elders arrived through the storm, each carrying their own memories and records of the silver horses, the barn filled with the weight of generations of protection. The foals responded to each elder's presence, their light shifting and flowing in patterns that matched the oldest cave paintings, the most ancient stories. Modern science and ancient wisdom weren't opposing forces. They were twin paths leading to the same truth. James read the brief's final provisions: mandatory preservation of the land, protection of the bloodlines, and, most importantly, recognition of the horses as something more than property to be bought and sold. Your grandfather, Rose said softly, didn't just save them from Blackwood. He made sure they'd have guardians for generations to come. Not owners, guardians. Blackwood's face had gone slack as he read the documents, finally understanding how completely his plans had been undone. Decades of maneuvering, millions spent on research and legal preparation, all of it countered by a simple truth. Some things couldn't be owned because they belonged to something larger than any one person's ambition. The smallest foal's glow suddenly intensified, and for a moment its markings formed patterns that exactly matched the designs in Rose's ancient carved horse. Past and present, science and spirit, memory and mystery, all flowing together in silver light. Outside, more vehicles were arriving. The first light of dawn was breaking through the storm clouds. But inside the barn, 3 impossible horses continued their gentle radiance, watching as human laws and institutions finally aligned to protect something older than civilization itself. The choice had been made. Now it was time to ensure it would last. The voice recording crackled to life on Emily's laptop. A decades-old conversation captured in secret, now restored from the depths of her digital archives. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Theodore. James's grandfather's voice, strong and certain despite the recording's age. These horses aren't a discovery, they're a revelation. Don't be dramatic, Richard, Blackwood's younger voice replied. We're on the verge of the greatest breakthrough in genetic science. Think of the applications. That's exactly what I'm thinking about, and that's why they have to be protected. In the present, Blackwood stood rigid as his past self continued, arguing, his face tightening with each exchanged word. Dawn was breaking outside, the storm finally passing, but the tension in the barn remained electric. You sacrificed everything, present-day Blackwood said quietly. Your reputation, your legacy, decades of research. And for what? To let them run wild? To let them stay true, James answered, understanding flowing through him like the foal's silver light. You still don't see it, do you? Every test you ran, every gene you mapped, you were only seeing the surface. The recording continued. These genetic markers aren't tools to be exploited, Theodore. They're keys to understanding something profound about life itself, about connection, about memory. Emily's equipment hummed as the foals moved in perfect synchronization, their light creating patterns that matched ancient cave paintings and modern genetic maps simultaneously. Science and spirit dancing in silver light. Your grandfather was a fool, Blackwood snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. He threw away the chance to change the world. No, Rose said, stepping forward. He chose to protect the world instead of changing it. There's a wisdom in that choice. The recording reached its climax, the moment everything changed. I won't let you turn them into weapons, Theodore. Into tools. They're meant to remind us of what we've forgotten, not help us dominate what we fear. The smallest foal approached Blackwood, its eyes holding knowledge older than science. Its silver markings flowed like liquid starlight, forming patterns that spoke to something deep in human memory. Look at them, James said softly. Really look. Not at what they could be turned into. Not at their market value or military potential. Look at what they are. Blackwood did look, and for a moment his mask of cold ambition cracked. The foal's light seemed to reach inside him, touching something long buried. I remember, he whispered, almost to himself, the first time we saw them out in the wild, before the contracts and studies. They were magnificent, James finished. Not because of what we could make them into, because of what they already were. The recording ended with his grandfather's final words to Blackwood. Some things aren't meant to be owned, Theodore. They're meant to be witnessed, protected, remembered. Outside, vehicles were moving into position, tribal police, state authorities, federal agents. The legal machinery was in motion, frameworks of protection falling into place. But here in the barn, something older than law was working its own kind of justice. The foal's light touched everyone. James, with his newfound understanding, Rose, with her ancestral wisdom, Emily, with her evolving science. Even Mark, watching from the shadows, felt its pull towards something greater than profit. Blackwood stood in that silver radiance, decades of ambition meeting generations of wisdom. The horses he'd spent a lifetime trying to possess now offered him something different, not ownership, but understanding. It was never about the genetics, was it? He said finally, his voice heavy with realization. Your grandfather knew. All those years ago he knew what I couldn't see. That some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, James said. They're meant to be honored. The dawn light joined the horse's glow, painting the barn in shades of silver and gold. Outside, the machinery of modern protection whirred into action, papers filed, boundaries drawn, safeguards established. But inside, an older form of protection had already taken hold. Blackwood looked one last time at the foals, at the living embodiment of what he'd spent decades trying to capture and control. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out into the morning light. The smallest foal nickered softly, a sound that seemed to echo through layers of time. In its light, James saw the truth that had guided his grandfather's choice, that had sustained Rose's people's wisdom, that would shape the future of these remarkable beings. Some powers aren't meant to be contained. They're meant to be witnessed, protected, and most of all remembered. The conservation agreement lay open on the barn's workbench, its pages illuminated by both morning light and the foal's steady silver glow. Representatives from 3 tribal nations, 2 federal agencies, and an international genetic heritage foundation had worked through the night to craft something unprecedented. It's more than a preservation order, Sarah explained, pointing to key passages. It's a new framework for protecting living heritage, the land, the bloodlines, the knowledge, all of it safeguarded together. Emily added her scientific documentation, pages of genetic data paired with Rose's traditional knowledge. We're calling it integrated heritage preservation. The genetic markers aren't just biological data, they're part of a larger pattern of living memory. The smallest foal pressed against its stall door, its markings flowing like quicksilver as tribal elders approached. Each elder carried their own records, stories, photographs, drawings passed down through generations. Modern law was finally catching up to ancient wisdom. Your grandfather hoped for this, Rose said, watching the integration of past and present, not just protecting the horses, but creating a way for different kinds of knowledge to work together. The agreement's provisions were comprehensive. The ranch would become a protected sanctuary, managed by a council that included tribal representatives, scientists, and members of James's family. The foal's bloodline would be preserved but never exploited. Research would be allowed but strictly regulated. Look at this section, Sarah said, highlighting a passage. It specifically incorporates tribal stories and traditional knowledge as legal evidence of the horse's historical significance. That's never been done before. Outside, media crews were gathering again, but now they faced a united front. Mike, Running Wolf, coordinated with tribal police while state troopers established perimeters. Local ranchers, understanding what was at stake, formed their own protective buffer. Emily's equipment recorded everything as the foals demonstrated their extraordinary abilities, not for exploitation, but for understanding. Their genetic heritage would be studied and protected, never weaponized or commercialized. It's like your grandfather wrote, James said, reading from the journal. They're not meant to be changed by us. They're meant to change us. And look, they already have. The agreement reflected that change. Pages of careful legislation protected not just physical assets, but principles. The value of integrated knowledge, the importance of cultural memory, the need to preserve mysteries, as well as facts. Mark approached hesitantly, looking both ashamed and awed. I didn't understand before what grandfather was protecting, what you're protecting now. None of us fully understood, James replied. That's the point. Some things take generations to comprehend. The foals moved in perfect synchronization, their silver light touching everyone in the barn. Scientists and elders, lawyers and ranchers, family and former foes, all witnessed something that transcended individual interests. Sarah finalized. The last details: perpetual land trusts, research protocols, preservation guidelines. But the real protection, everyone knew, lay in the connection being forged between past and present, between different ways of seeing and knowing. This is just the beginning, Rose said, watching the foals shine. These little ones will grow, strengthen, perhaps even find others of their kind. The old stories say there are more out there, waiting to be remembered. The agreement's final. Page required signatures from all parties. One by one, they stepped forward, tribal leaders, government officials, scientific authorities, and family members. Each signature represented not just legal authority, but personal commitment to something larger than themselves. James signed last, feeling the weight of generations in his hand. The smallest foal nickered softly, its light steady and sure. Outside, the morning sun touched the mountains where the original herd had run free, where his grandfather had learned to see beyond science, where ancient wisdom still lived in silver light. The agreement wasn't just a document, it was a bridge between worlds, a framework for protecting things too precious to be owned. In its pages, Modern law and ancient knowledge worked together to guard a mystery that belonged to all of them, and to none of them. Dawn's light merged with the foal's glow, painting the future in shades of silver and gold. The new ranch sign caught the morning light, its fresh paint gleaming. Cooper Wildlife Sanctuary, Protected Heritage Site. Below, in smaller letters, a partnership of science, spirit, and memory. But it was the symbol above the text that drew every eye. 3 silver horses in full stride, their markings flowing like starlight. Your grandfather would have loved this, Sarah said, watching the sunrise paint the sign in shades of gold. 1 month had transformed the ranch into something none of them had imagined. Where Blackwood surveillance vehicles had once lurked, now research stations gathered data with respect and care. Emily coordinated with tribal knowledge keepers, combining genetic analysis with traditional observation. The foal's daily activities were recorded not for exploitation, but for understanding. "Look at them now," Rose said softly. The 3 young horses moved through their expanded paddock with growing confidence. Their silver markings had only grown stronger, shifting and flowing in patterns that matched both ancient cave paintings and the most sophisticated genetic maps. Local ranchers, once skeptical, now served as voluntary guardians. They understood what was at stake, not just rare horses, but a different way of seeing the land and its mysteries. Their children came to learn from tribal elders, while scientists shared their findings in town hall meetings. Mark approached the fence, changed by the month's events. "The old storage barn," he said. "We could convert it into an education center, share the story properly." James nodded, remembering how his cousin had transformed from potential betrayer to passionate advocate. The foal's influence touched everyone differently, but it always led to change. Emily emerged from her converted lab space, excitement in her eyes. "The genetic studies are extraordinary, not just the activation sequences, but the way they interact with the environment. It's like they're in constant dialogue with the land itself." The smallest foal, now strong and confident, approached the fence. Its coat rippled with silver light, responding to something only it could sense. Above, hawks circled in patterns that seemed to echo the horse's movements below. Mike Running Wolf's tribal police unit had established a regular presence, not to restrict, but to protect. They worked alongside state authorities, each group learning from the other. The sanctuary's integrated approach was becoming a model for other conservation efforts. "The stories were right," Rose said, watching the foals move in perfect synchronization. "They appear when they're needed, when the world needs to remember what it's forgotten." The sanctuary's first month had brought more than protection. It had brought understanding. Scientists published papers that incorporated traditional knowledge. Tribal youth programs combined ancient wisdom with modern education. The barrier between different ways of knowing began to dissolve. James studied the new sign, thinking of all it represented. His grandfather's vision expanded and transformed. A partnership between worlds that should never have been separated. Sarah reviewed the latest sanctuary reports. Visitors from universities, indigenous groups, and conservation organizations, all coming to witness something that challenged their assumptions about what was possible. The foals had grown noticeably, their silver markings now visible even under cloudy skies. They moved with the assurance of beings who knew their place in the world. Not as specimens to be studied, but as living links between past and future. Local artists had begun incorporating the horses' patterns into their work. Musicians spoke of songs that seemed to rise from the land itself. The sanctuary wasn't just protecting 3 unique creatures, it was nurturing a renaissance of connection and creativity. "Your grandfather protected them," Rose reminded James, "so they could protect something larger. Watch." As if on cue, the 3 young horses began to run, their silver markings blazing like captured starlight. Their movement was pure joy, unfettered by human ambition or greed. In their freedom, everyone watching saw something of their own liberation. The new sign caught the last rays of sunset, its silver horses seeming to move in the changing light. Below them, the real foals continued their dance of celebration, their light touching everything: fence posts and scientific instruments, tribal totems and legal documents, the faces of all who came to witness and learn. 1 month had changed everything, but really, James knew, it had just begun. The bronze plaque caught the morning sun, its surface showing 3 horses in full gallop, their forms captured in flowing lines that seemed to move in the changing light. Below the image, the words told a story of transformation: the Silver Horses Sanctuary, where ancient wisdom meets modern understanding, established 2024. 1 year had passed since 3 dying foals had changed everything. Now, on the anniversary of their discovery, the sanctuary hummed with life and purpose. "They've grown so beautiful," Emily said, watching the young horses through the observation window. No longer foals, they moved with the grace of their legendary ancestors. Their silver markings had matured into patterns that still defied scientific explanation while confirming the oldest stories. The smallest one, now the boldest, led its companions in intricate dances that matched both genetic sequences and ancient cave paintings. Their light touched everything: the land, the people, the very air that surrounded them. "Look what arrived this morning," Sarah said, bringing a letter bearing official seals. 3 more sanctuaries are being established using our integrated model, traditional knowledge and modern science working together. Rose nodded, her eyes bright with satisfaction. The old ones said the silver horses would return when they were needed most, when the world needed to remember what it had forgotten. The sanctuary had become more than a protection site. Universities sent researchers to study not just the horses, but the partnership between different ways of knowing. Tribal youth programs flourished alongside scientific internships. The barrier between ancient and modern wisdom continued to dissolve. Mark, fully redeemed by his year of dedicated service, led educational programs that combined family history with broader understanding. "Grandfather knew," he often told visitors. "He knew this was about more than genetics or profit. It was about remembering what matters most." They gathered at the plaque for the anniversary ceremony: local ranchers, tribal elders, scientists, and community members, all transformed by their connection to something larger than themselves. The 3 young horses approached the fence line, their silver markings bright in the morning sun. Behind them, the mountains stood witness, as they had for generations. The same mountains where the original herd had run free, where wisdom had been preserved in stories and songs, where mysteries still flourished beyond human understanding. James touched the plaque, feeling the weight of legacy in its bronze surface. His grandfather's vision had not just been preserved, it had grown into something greater. The sanctuary protected more than rare horses. It protected a way of seeing, the world that humanity desperately needed to remember. "There's something else," Emily said, showing her latest research results. "The genetic markers we've been studying, they're not just stable, they're resonating with the land itself. It's like the horses are in constant dialogue with forces we're only beginning to understand." The youngest children from the tribal school program had created artwork showing silver horses running through their dreams. Musicians spoke of melodies that rose from the earth when the horses danced. Artists tried to capture the flow of their markings, the way their light touched everything around them. Even Blackwood had changed. His foundation now funded research into traditional ecological knowledge, seeking understanding rather than control. His last letter to the sanctuary spoke of regret transformed into revelation. The three horses moved in perfect synchronization, their silver light painting the world in shades of mystery and hope. They were no longer orphaned foals struggling to survive. They had become what they were always meant to be, bridges between worlds, reminders of forgotten wisdom, guardians of something precious and profound. Rose's voice carried the weight of generations. The stories say there will be more, that when the time is right, more silver horses will find their way home. The mountain wind carried scents of sage and pine, of ancient paths and new possibilities. The sanctuary had become a place where different truths could coexist, where the boundary between science and spirit dissolved in silver light. James looked at the plaque one last time before the ceremony began. His grandfather's legacy lived on, not just in bronze and paper, but in the living dialogue between past and present, between different ways of knowing and seeing and believing. The three horses raised their heads to the morning sun, their markings flowing like starlight. In their grace, everyone watching saw something of their own transformation. They had become more than protected creatures. They were living reminders that some mysteries deserve to remain mysterious, that some powers are meant not to be controlled but to be witnessed, honored, and remembered.